3 stakeholders, 1 resistant regulator, and a $200,000 deployment sitting on hold because nobody closed the engagement gap. The PMP exam will test you on exactly this scenario, and most candidates pick the wrong answer because they confuse sending an update with actually managing engagement. I am Paul. Let me show you the matrix that changes everything. The PMP exam will ask you about the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. Here is where students who have read the chapter still get it wrong. The concept makes sense on paper. The exam tests what happens when your data does not match reality. On an event project I managed, ignoring one regulator shifted our progress baseline by $40,000. I am Paul, 25 years of project delivery. I have had to stand in front of a steering committee and explain why the math said one thing and the project said another. Let me show you how to avoid that. When we misread how a stakeholder actually feels about a project, the consequences appear in our performance reporting. Fast. I once assumed a local community leader was fully supportive, but they were resistant. They managed to halt our entire construction crew. Your sponsor will look at a timeline gap that looks permanent from the outside, all because one relationship was tracked incorrectly. That is not a communications problem, that is an engagement problem. And the exam knows the difference even when practitioners do not. The PMB OK Guide 8th edition defines the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix as a tool that compares current engagement levels against desired engagement levels. We classify each stakeholder into one of 5 categories: unaware, resistant, neutral, supportive, or leading. Unaware means they do not know the project exists. Resistant means they are aware but opposed to change. Neutral means they neither push for nor against the work. Supportive means they want it to succeed. Leading means they are actively driving outcomes forward. I used this exact grid to diagnose a silent breakdown on a software rollout before it became a stoppage. Before we look at the math, take a moment with a project you have actually worked on. Pick one stakeholder and ask yourself honestly, what was their real engagement level, and what level did you actually need from them? Most of us have at least one name that comes to mind immediately. That gap between where they were and where they needed to be is exactly what the matrix is designed to surface. The exam will test whether you can spot it. The next section shows you the specific calculation the PMP exam uses to separate candidates who understood the matrix from those who just memorized the categories. We are going to walk through how one unmapped stakeholder gap, a single cell on a single row, produces a measurable impact on your primary project tracking metrics. This is the number you will see in the question. I want to make sure you know exactly where it comes from. Here is the scenario. You are managing an event project with 3 key stakeholders. You assume the local regulator was supportive, but their actual current engagement level is resistant. Because their concerns were never addressed, they formally block your permit and work stops completely. Your planned value, the budgeted cost of work scheduled, is $100,000. Because of the stoppage, your earned value, the value of work actually completed, is only $60,000. Your actual cost at this point is $75,000. Hold those 3 numbers. To find the impact on your schedule, calculate schedule variance. The formula is schedule variance equals earned value minus planned value. Line by line, that is $60,000 minus $100,000. Your schedule variance is negative $40,000. The correct exam answer is B. That negative result tells you the project is behind schedule because of the blocked permit. And here is the thing. This is not a cost control problem. The matrix failure caused the schedule failure. That is the distinction the exam is actually testing. Here is what I see most often, and I will be honest, one of these I made myself early on. I assumed a stakeholder was supportive because they attended the kickoff and smiled. That is not data. That is a feeling. The second trap is confusing communication distribution with engagement management. Sending a weekly status report to a resistant stakeholder does not move them. I have seen practitioners tick the box on report delivery and genuinely believe the problem is handled, while the stakeholder is still quietly working against the project. There are 2 steps I now use on every delivery contract. First, assess the true current engagement level of each key stakeholder through direct conversation or observed behavior, not assumption. Second, Define explicitly what engagement level they need to be at for the project to succeed, then build your communications plan around closing that specific gap. What I found is that getting a neutral stakeholder to supportive before critical path work begins removes a category of risk that no schedule buffer can replace. The exam draws a clear line between managed communications and managed stakeholder engagement. Practitioners often send a mass status report and consider the relationship managed. The exam expects something different. It expects you to actively work with people, understand their specific concerns, and foster direct involvement. If a scenario describes a stakeholder who is actively resisting and the answer choices include changing the report format or increasing the frequency of updates, both of those are wrong. The exam is always looking for the answer that addresses the person, not the paperwork. You are leading a retail software rollout. Your stakeholder matrix shows the store manager is currently neutral, but the desired engagement level is supportive. What is the immediate purpose of identifying this gap? A. To remove the stakeholder from the project. B. To direct the level of communications necessary to effectively engage the stakeholder. C. To escalate the issue to the project sponsor. D. To reclassify the stakeholder using the salience model. Take a moment. Which one would you choose? The correct answer is B. The gap between current and desired engagement tells you the level of communication and intervention required to move that stakeholder forward. That is the core function of the matrix. It does not just describe where people are, it directs what you do next. The common trap is C. Escalation feels decisive, but it is reactive. The exam rewards the proactive answer. Now let us add the numbers. Question 2 uses the scenario we just built. You are managing an event project with 3 key stakeholders. A resistant regulator blocks your permit. Your planned value is $100,000, your earned value is $60,000, and your actual cost is $75,000. What is your schedule variance? A. Negative $15,000. B. Negative $40,000. C. Positive $40,000. D. 0.6. Take a moment. Which one would you choose? The correct answer is B. Schedule variance equals earned value minus planned value. $60,000 minus $100,000 gives you negative $40,000. The trap is A. Negative $15,000. That answer uses actual cost instead of planned value, which gives you cost variance, not schedule variance. This is one of the most reliable distractors on the exam. Know the formula. Know which inputs go where. Question 3 now tests whether you understand where the practitioner approach breaks down. A project manager on a tech infrastructure upgrade ensures all 3 key stakeholders receive the weekly status report via email, on time, every week. One resistant stakeholder continues to oppose the project. Why is the project manager failing according to the PMP exam? A. Because managed stakeholder engagement requires working with stakeholders directly, not just distributing information. B. Because the exam requires forcing the stakeholder into the supportive category. C. Because the exam requires a push communication method instead of a pull method. D. Because the exam prioritizes neutral stakeholders over resistant ones. Take a moment. Which one would you choose? The correct answer is A, and this is the practitioner to exam gap right here. Managed communications is about making sure information reaches people. Managed stakeholder engagement is about working with people to understand their concerns, resolve issues, and foster real involvement. Sending an email is managed communications. Having a conversation with a resistant stakeholder to understand what is actually driving their opposition, that is managed stakeholder engagement. The trap is C. The email is already a push method. Changing the method does not fix the relationship. That gap is exactly where experienced practitioners lose marks. When I was studying for my PMP, I treated the stakeholder register as a setup task, something you fill out in initiation and file away. I never thought of it as a live tracking tool. On a mixed-use development I was managing a few years into my career, a compliance officer I had never spoken to directly stopped our entire fit-out phase. That name was in my register with a neutral classification. The actual level was resistant. I had the tool. I just was not using it. Keep your matrix current. The stakeholder you stop tracking is usually the one who stops your project. If this breakdown helped you see the difference between communication and engagement, please like and subscribe. It helps me know which concepts to go deeper on. Before your next project meeting, open your Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix and map the gap for your 3 most critical stakeholders. That single step will tell you where your project friction is coming from. I am Paul. Study smart. See you next week.